Thank you, Ross, and thank you to Peter and Jen and the whole team for bringing us together. And good morning to you, wherever you're tuning in from. I can see friends in the audience as well, Rich Mulholland down in South Africa. So it's a bit of a reunion for me. I must say, seeing where you're all from this morning, talk about wanderlust. I've been missing everyone enough already, and then seeing these amazing countries and cities flashing up into the chat just made me yearn to be face to face with entrepreneurs all around the world again. And I have to say, this is one of the most international groups that I've connected with over the last year and a half. So you've already done my soul so much good just by inviting me this morning. Next time you're tempted to ask somebody, what's keeping, or rather, what do you do? What do you do? I think it can be one of the worst questions you can ask. So instead, I challenge you to ask them instead, what's keeping you busy? What's keeping you busy? It's a rather lovely question, isn't it? And the reason I think it's a lovely question is they can go anywhere with it, can't they? Because they can tell you about their house renovation. They can tell you about a holiday in another 2 years' time or whatever that they're planning. They can tell you about their kids. They can tell you about their hobbies if they want. So my first clue, I guess, of the day is don't ask, what do you do? And why do I particularly say that? I sometimes think if you say to someone, what do you do? It can sound like the pressure is on them to impress you with the answer, and you're going to judge them in some way by what they do. So we can get to what they do in their job and they will give us clues, but ask them what's keeping them busy instead. So what's keeping me busy? Let me just tell you, I've got just a few images here to share. Yes, top left, turn on the subtitles. That's a simple campaign. It's with our National Literacy Trust here in the UK. It's because if you turn on subtitles for kids' TV, you double the chances of them becoming a proficient reader. Amazing science and research behind it. So we just need to persuade YouTube and Amazon and Netflix to turn them on by default. And we're getting there. Netflix have done a global trial. Amazon are putting a pilot into place. Sky have put it on their 500 most popular episodes. I'm on the board of various organizations, including 1 Million Mentors, lucky enough to host a podcast for one of Prince Charles's charities, where I get to interview global CEOs from Bupa, McKinsey, Google, and I team them up with a person who's just joined the workforce. And I get them to ask each other questions. As Ross says, I've been lucky enough to host the Great British Entrepreneur Awards since they started, so I guess 7 or 8 years ago, because I love meeting entrepreneurs. So Founders for Schools, sending speakers into schools, bridging that gap. So yeah, I love to connect. I love communication. I love hosting. But I also have a soft spot, a sweet spot, if you like, for helping to start things. And about 15 or more years ago, I made one of the best decisions of my life. I went along to a dinner. I thought it'd be a bit stuffy. It was at the Four Seasons in London. And I had the jackpot dinner guest next to me. She was engaging. She was fun. She was hugely entrepreneurial. Her name was Julia, and she introduced me to this name I'd never heard of. At the time, it was called YEO, now EO. And that day, it really did change my life, because EO for me, particularly in London, helped me meet friends and colleagues. And many, many years later, I invited Julia to a drinks of my own at the Centre for Entrepreneurs, which I'm on the board of, a think tank in London. And at that drinks, she met somebody at the bar, and that somebody became her fiance and love of her life. So I like to think there's a karma there. So I'm going to start us off with just a couple of thoughts to sort of shift our mind this morning. The first comes from Theodore Zeldin. And Theodore Zeldin is a professor at Oxford University, and he said, life is a search for people. Life is a search for people. So my question to you, EO, and to you personally, is who are you searching for? Not just in your business, but in your life. Life is a search for people, friends, colleagues, allies, partners, life adventurers. Who are you searching for? And the other quotation, just to get our minds going this morning, comes from the Persian mystic Rumi. And he said, what you seek is seeking you. So I guess part of that is saying, what are you seeking? What are you seeking in life? But the second piece of it, which I think is so powerful, is this idea that whatever you're seeking is also out there seeking you. So I love that the rules have been suspended this week. As we say, here's who I need to meet. Here's who I want to meet. Let me ask you a question. And it's on this theme that Ross has hinted at, of building a better network. My simple question is, what would building a better network, and maybe pop it in the chat for me, what would building a better network mean to you? Building a better network would mean that I could. Just anything that comes to your mind when I ask that question. Building a better network would mean that I could. Just chuck it in the chat as we go along. And I'd love to see how your ideas evolve. Work on more meaningful work, that interesting drive for purpose. That's, is it Dan Pink that talks about autonomy and mastery and purpose? And an ex-Netflix employee added community to that mix. What is it that we really yearn for in our working lives? Help connect more people. I mean, it's the secret superpower, isn't it, of a life-changing introduction. I'm lucky enough to have introduced several people to their life partners, their business partners. And so, excuse me, today, I'm not going to be suggesting that you have to become a super connector. I'm just going to be suggesting that you can tighten up on some things you're probably doing already. And that's what we're going to talk about. Feel more fulfilled. What a brilliantly honest thing to share. I totally agree. Feel more fulfilled. Energize my day. 8 hours sleep, 8 hours work, and 8 hours play. What a brilliant vision from Gavin Hoff. I love it. Okay, so my challenge to you, because a lot of networking is about connecting with people. And more than you recognize is about reconnecting or keeping connected with the people we already know. So I'm going to share some practical tips in our session together today. But first of all, I want to get to the why, the what's the point question. And for me, building a network is very simply about 3 things. Firstly, it's about getting stuff done. If you have a better network, you can get stuff done quicker. You reduce friction. You don't have to spend months and weeks building up trust. Okay. Secondly, building a better network means attracting more opportunities, becoming magnetized as a person, as an organization to brilliant opportunities from all around the world. And thirdly, building a better network means it makes it easier for you to help other people. Some of that already coming through in the chat this morning. The desire to make an impact, to have more meaning in your work, to help other people. So I think the world is smaller than ever. Stanley Milgram talked about 6 degrees of separation. I think that's reduced, particularly if you know the right super connectors around the world. So let's open our minds this morning. And let me ask you just a huge question. And it's not even to progress your business right now. It's if you could have coffee with anybody and you knew that you'd write to them or write them a letter. By the way, that can still be one of the most old-fashioned and powerful techniques in the world, writing a letter. Who would you write to if you knew they'd say yes? Who would you write to if you could have coffee with anyone? Just chuck it in the chat just so I can see how your minds are working this morning. I'd like to really get us thinking. Would it be a head of state? Would it be Seth Godin? Unleashing the Idea Virus, one of my favorite ever books, one of his first books, I think. Here we go. Is that Sir Alex Ferguson, former manager of Manchester United, the hairdryer, Branson, of course, Adam Grant, what a brilliant thinker, I think based out of the New York area, and Elon Musk is hugely up there on the list. So Sadhguru's come up twice there. That's very interesting. Bill Gates, sadly in the news today. It's good to get our minds working on this, because here's a question. If you took the 5 people you've always wanted to have coffee with on your dream list, have you ever considered just dropping them a note? Just to say you recognize them. You notice them in this world, on this planet. You admire the work they're doing, and you think that for you, it resonates. Try it. Why? Because, yeah, there's a chance that they might reply, but it sends a signal to them that they're not alone in this journey. So I think the more we think about this, the better, because it gets us stretching that muscle about who we want to meet. So we'll come on to that, because I want to know in your business who you want to meet to take it further. Some brilliant suggestions coming through. We should keep all of the chat on this. So I guess my first challenge to you today is think of those 5 people, or even 3 people who you'd have coffee with if you could have coffee with anyone, and consider them dropping a note. ceoemail.com will reveal pretty much always the correct email address of the world's most powerful CEOs. And by the way, if you're back to using the phone, the quickest way you get a CEO's email from their office is you call them up, but never ask for their email. They'll never give you their email. Their gatekeepers certainly will never give you their email. So what you have to say is, oh, I'm just writing a note to, let's say, Paul Polman, the former chair of Unilever, or the chief exec of Unilever. I'm just writing an email to Paul, and I'm writing to Paul.Polman. The gatekeeper corrects you, no, it's P.Polman. So you'll be corrected into having the correct email address. Okay, so why do I think this is so powerful? Reaching out to people, connecting with people. Well, it came from my love of starting things. I started as a student. I'm an entrepreneur in Leeds University. I wrote a long shot. I had a long shot in mind. I needed advice on advertising. I called the world's best known ad agency, Saatchi & Saatchi, and that cold call got me through to their global marketing director. He took my call. He didn't know who I was, but actually that one call led to me being invited into Saatchi HQ, to meeting their clients, to raising investment, and even to be given my own secret office. So I believe these long shot calls can work, especially for entrepreneurs. You've already got style, you've already got energy, you've already got huge credibility. So ask yourself a question. Are you still putting those long shots out there several years into your business? The what if email, the letter to your all-time dream partner, or as things got a little busier, have you stopped a bit? And I'm going to come to some techniques for doing it. Just to give you a flavor of how I like to start things, let's talk a little bit about tenor. I went into a school over 15 years ago. I'd given a talk. It wasn't that good, if I'm honest. It was to secondary school pupils. I was trying to inspire them to start things. I just thought, is giving a talk really the best way? So I had this crazy thought that there must be a better way. There must be a challenge I can give them. I pick up the newspaper. In it is an article about a vicar in Britain, in Suffolk, who instead of asking his congregation for money, has given his congregation money. He said, who wants £10? And any profit you make, please give it back to the church. And he made thousands and thousands of pounds. So I thought in that light bulb moment, what would happen if we gave £10 to British school children? And I thought, just for fun, we should give it to 10,000 school kids. So that's what we did. And tenor started from a very humble beginning and became, as you can see in this next shot, the world's, or certainly initially the UK and now the world's, because we've gone global into 10 other countries through Junior Achievement and Young Enterprise with the 10X Challenge, the UK's largest schools enterprise challenge. So over 500,000 kids later, they've had a spark of an idea, they've learned something about themselves. But it all started by immersing myself in that experience, by writing to that vicar, and then gathering around me my kitchen cabinet. A kitchen cabinet, a bit like the Prime Minister here in the UK would have his cabinet meeting. So a kitchen cabinet is very personal to you, a group that you can summon physically or virtually, that you know have your back, that you know will challenge you. And you go to at times of crossroads, at times of big decisions. So who's in that kitchen cabinet for you? And have you checked in with them recently? And how diverse is that group in terms of their background, their age, their generation, their industry? Are you confident that they're able to give you those really different perspectives? So if you're making a note to self this morning, I'd write down kitchen cabinet, and just almost as a fantasy football example, if there were 12 names in that kitchen cabinet of real people who you know, who do you put in it? So tenor emerged, and it taught me a lot of things along the way, because I can honestly say that everything I've helped to start over the years, become a shareholder in, helped start as a company, has started with some form or other of long shot. And by the way, this is going to be controversial to some of our guests this morning, because there's a great school of thought that says, look, warm intros are the only way, and we're going to be practicing some of that later. So if you want to get in with Bill Gates, if you want to get in with Tesla, you go through a trusted connection. And that might be true much of the time. Okay, so I'm not trying to put you off putting out there who you want to meet. I've just noticed firsthand that long shots really can work. So when you're limbering up to write that long shot email, just take a moment now to think in your business today, who's that going to be? And we'll steal a bit of the thunder from the next sessions. But if you could get into any organization right now as a partner, as a client, as an investor to drive your business forward, tell me who it would be. Whack it in the chat for me this morning. And this will be a little bit of a taster for the one-to-ones and the breakout sessions we're going to do. But just give me a couple of ideas and names in the chat this morning, because I'd love to see those coming through to me as you start sending those through. So let me know who you'd like to meet personally, and that'll get us thinking. Because what I've done over the years is I've tried to analyze all of the emails that I've sent which have been successful and what stood them out from the crowd. So here, with that in mind, I want to give you my top tips for all of those long shots. Let's have a look at my top 10 tips. Here they come. The first tip is on personalization. Make it personal. And even before that, in fact, why don't we bring them all up? I'm going to walk you through them. Because that first tip I should have spotted is actually on timing. And I don't mean the time of day either. I mean, in some cases, that email will have better effect for you. For example, the best emails I've ever sent have been sent between 8 and 9, or maybe 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning, and probably 10 p.m. and midnight at night. So think about the time of day. But also, and I'm going to cover this in the 10th point, I'm going to race through these on triggers. Is today really the best day for you to send that email to that target, the head of sponsorship at Nike or Adidas, Burn Harnish, and so on? Or could it be better triggered? So something I've talked about with EO before is the fact that I must confess, have Google Alerts set up on huge numbers of people in my network to keep me posted on what they're doing, and targets of mine that I want to get to know. So I set up that free Google Alert, and when they hit the news or they hit the web in a new way, Rich Mulholland at Missing Link, best presentation company in the world, I get a simple Google Alert. Really powerful, helps me keep in touch, because that can affect my timing. Secondly, personalization. I don't just mean Dear Rich. I mean doing a recent Google search, latest 24 hours, last week, last month, to show that you have been paying attention to Rich's life. Congratulations on winning that other award, on opening that new office, on that new partnership you've struck up with Apple or TED. Really, really powerful. Not just their name, but something that makes them think this isn't just random, they meant it for me. The third thing, how do you gain trust? How do you go from a random to being someone they start to gently trust in their subconscious within that second or third line of an email? The way to build trust: use a noun, a name that they recognize. It could be a city, it could be an organization, it could be a mutual friend, it could be a shared interest. The sooner you can start to use words or phrases they recognize and relate to, the quicker you will build trust. Next, credibility. Don't bury your creds in your letter or your email. If you're a rocket scientist from NASA pitching to SpaceX, we need to hear that in the second or third line at latest. So many people bury that in the mix, far too much. Brevity. The quickest way to make a long email look like a short email is to put more information under the signature. So you keep that initial email to Ross Drake's really pithy, with more information under the email. So keep it nice and snappy. Patience. The big mistake I see entrepreneurs making month on month, year on year, is they ask someone to marry them on the first date. They pitch everything in that first email. Your first job on that email is probably just getting their attention, getting their engagement, and potentially holding your line, waiting and being patient. When Tenor went into all of the national newspapers in the UK and got on to receive huge accolades and participation, the first email I sent to the BBC was nothing about Tenor. It was just to the editor of a news program about that night's show. He came straight back saying, "Thank you so much. It's good to hear from you. I'd love to know what you're doing." I wrote straight back saying, "Funny you should ask. I'm doing a national schools challenge." So be patient. Persistence. And here's the secret I know many entrepreneurs on the call will know. I would say 8 out of 10 of the real breakthrough emails I've ever sent have had no impact at all the first time I've sent them. So I've had to go to my sent items and send them more than once. How long do you wait? It could be days, it could be weeks, it's probably not months. Because to me, if you're writing to a stranger, and I know this will offend some people saying never send an email more than once, respectfully, I don't agree. Don't be afraid to send that email. People are busy, people miss communications, okay? Think about the different channels you're using. Is it getting their attention with something, liking something on LinkedIn, and then switching channel by email? If you see they've been at an organization for 10 years on one channel, congratulate them on another channel. Seeing it's their birthday, for example, not so much for a long shot, although it certainly worked for me. And by the way, Dame Scylla, happy birthday to you. It really makes a nice little difference. I read it in the Times newspaper, but I didn't hesitate to put it in a little email. 9 is really a little bit from Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it's particularly on location, but of course now that could be virtual and on Zoom. But do everything in your power to offer to go to where they are and whatever is most convenient for them. If that's a 10-minute Zoom, so be it. And finally, on triggers, we'll come out of this list now, but on triggers, just think, what is it that triggers you writing to them? Is it because they've hit the news in some way? Is it because, and this is a favorite technique of mine, is it because you know they've had a really rough time? Their sector has been hit. You know they've hit the headlines. You know they've got some bad rep for something. Just saying, look, I can see you've had a tough time and I just wanted you to know I'm thinking of you. That's probably not the email to pitch your business in that first instance. But you see what I mean? It's just reaching out to your fellow human beings with those. Do I send the email afresh as if it were the first time? To be perfectly honest, Amar, I do. I used to tiptoe across the top of it going, I'm sorry you might have been too busy to read this the first time, but now I just send exactly the same email all over again. And that will horrify at least some of our guests this morning. But for me, you might say, well, that's a bit weird, isn't it? Sending the email exactly the same a second time. But I think it's a bit weird of them not to reply to me 3 weeks ago. And actually, in 20 years, no one said, haven't you sent me this email before? So do consider that persistence. I predict your sent items will be littered with emails that have never been responded to, that if you gave them one more chase, they might bear fruit. So have a think about it. We're going to have time for questions at the end with Ross, but I just want to move on to what I think is the other technique. So I guess zooming out from all of this, I'm not suggesting you have to become a super connector, but if you can tighten up on your ability to send long shots, your ability to keep in touch, your ability to make amazing introductions, and your ability to get back in touch with people you have lost touch with, if you can improve all of those 4 things by just 10 or 20%, you will build a better network. So those 4 again: sending long shots, keeping in touch, okay, making rock star introductions, and getting back in touch with those people that you have fallen out of touch with, even though you wish you hadn't. Then that is going to lead to huge returns. So when you're keeping in touch, think of it as concentric circles. You've got your inner circle, your kitchen cabinet, your friends. But actually, all of the research, you go back to Granovetter, Stanford University. He said, look, opportunities reach people through people. We know this. But his research showed that opportunities reach people through people we know, but just not very well. That's a huge insight, isn't it? Even 40, 50 years later. Because what it means to us as entrepreneurs is we have to get better. We have to get better at keeping in touch with those loose ties, with those weak ties. So my question to you is, what techniques are you using to keep in touch with the wider parts of your network? Here are a few that I use. Sharing things. If I see an article, a tweet, a piece in the newspaper, I don't keep it to myself. It's about building in habits. I share it with 1 or 2 people. The phrase I use, I saw this and I thought of you. The other phrase I use, no need to reply. Really powerful phrases. In fact, using that phrase in an email, no need to reply, I've noticed more than doubles the chance that they will reply. But it's a lovely way to edge back onto someone's radar with a low commitment. You're not saying, hi, how are you? Can we have coffee? You're just saying, I know that you're interested in hybrid trains or a reduction of greenhouse gases. I thought of you. What a lovely way to get back in touch. Build it in as a habit. Noticing, we'll get to, but updating them about you, about your progress. And I don't just mean in a December round robin. I mean about where you want to go. Okay, I think the big mistake that too many entrepreneurs make is they talk too much about today, too much about yesterday. They don't talk enough about tomorrow. They don't talk enough about where they want to go. Of course, if we go into any forum, that's all that entrepreneurs are talking about, the future, the future, the future, but publicly, just nudging it a little bit, saying, I'd love to do more in Japan. I'm really looking to work with some more paper manufacturers across the Middle East. Yeah, putting it out there about your future, updating your network. Thirdly, inviting. If you see an opportunity, it could be a virtual event. It could be to go to a physical gathering when it's allowed. Consider inviting someone along to that. You might want to come with me to this. Invite someone, a really nice way to keep in touch with someone. Finally, notice things about them. This is where your Google alerts can come in. This is where browsing their LinkedIn, their Twitter can come in as well. Use that phrase, no need to reply, but just say, hey, Ross, just a quick one. I noticed you've just published that book. Congratulations. I hope it goes really well. Just noticing, saying, I see you. I continue to see you. I continue to support you. Keep it brief, keep it personal. Notice things about them. So for me, that is hugely, hugely important in terms of keeping in touch. So the other question is getting back in touch with people. So think about getting back in touch with people. I'm going to pause shortly for us to take some questions, but if I could encourage you, let's just set it out a little bit for where we've got to so far. I strongly encourage you today to make a list of those business long shots. People that if you knew they'd have coffee with you on a business footing, you would definitely write to them. Make a list of those. I'd strongly encourage you to make a list, another list of the people in your network that you feel you haven't lost touch with, but you really ought to check in with, and use one of my techniques. Is it noticing? Is it updating? Is it sharing? Is it inviting? And drop them a note using one of those techniques. And then finally, think of the people in your network that for whatever reason you've lost touch with, and drop them a note. And here I just call it out. I just say, I'm so sorry we seem to have lost touch. I often blame it on myself. I'm British, so I say, I'm so sorry, it's my fault we've lost touch, but I'd love to know what's keeping you busy. And from my side, maybe that comes later down the line, maybe that personal update. So I think if you can tighten up on that long shot, tighten up on the keeping in touch and getting back in touch with. The final thing, just to sow the seed. I think the way we have better conversations, the way we have better networks and build better networks is by talking about our future, but also by asking better questions about where somebody else wants to go in their future. So nice open questions. What are some of the things you want to be doing over the course of the next year? And listening, really listening to the answer, because sometimes that answer can lead to a really powerful introduction. And don't forget, if Ross has just told me, or Rich has just told me, or Jen has just told me where she wants to go, okay, even by suggesting an individual, I don't have to commit to introducing them to that individual, but just putting a name on their radar can be powerful and helpful. So think about your superpower this morning to help each other, just by painting bits of the radar, bits of the picture in for people. Have you heard of? Did you know about this organization? Okay, when you're making that introduction, I'm sure you're already masters of this already, but when you're making that introduction, consider sounding it out with both parties. I'd like to introduce you to Ross Drakes. Hugely impressive, brand agency, met him in South Africa. Would you be interested? Once they give you the green light, the thumbs up, that's the time to make that introduction. The classic mistake that entrepreneurs make when they're making an introduction, because we tend to be very enthusiastic, we don't explain correctly how we know both parties. And the problem with that is we end up introducing somebody who we've known and trusted for 15 years to someone we met last night at a virtual event. So you don't want that payback coming back to bite you in the backside, going, oh, tell me about Jonty. You go, oh no, sorry, I thought he was great. Okay. What we need is to manage that introduction and give them a clue about how urgent it is that they connect with each other. So think about the superpower you have to make life-changing introductions. Think about the superpower you have to connect with anyone, frankly, anyone in the world. I think you'll be amazed at who comes back to you, especially in this very strange time. People seem to be more responsive in many ways than I've ever known in the last 20 years. But most of all, remember that networking is partly about meeting new people and mostly about cultivating the people we already know. Because let's be honest, over this crazy year and a half, we've often neglected some of the people that we most admired and used to most enjoy spending time with. So on that, Ross, I'm going to pause to take some questions from the group, but I hope I've covered a range of techniques to hone up on.
Wow, Ollie, thank you so much. Just a reminder of some of those things. It was such a dense 30 minutes. I've got facts dribbling out of my ears here and 16 pages of notes. I'd like to just Open up. I've got a question for you. So every time I've met you, you've always remembered something about me, and you mention it when we meet. Like, how do you? Is this something you've deliberately cultivated? How do you store that information in your head? How do you recall all of these things? Because, you know, I can say from personal experience, when I meet you, I'm like, wow, Ollie remembered something about me, and that already lifts you in my, you know, in my perception, and I feel like I want to be more generous to you, and, you know, all of these things. So it's such a powerful tool that you use.
Well, so a few tips. Firstly, you're a genuinely lovely and remarkable individual, so you do make it easy, right? So I will confess that. Names is a big issue. I often forget names as soon as I've heard them. So the way I do that is, I'm not afraid to say, I'm so sorry, I've completely forgotten your name. And as long as you say it with warmth and recognition, people won't be offended by that. Okay. If you give them a blank face and go, who are you? I've forgotten your name. That's rude. Okay. So repeat their name. If it's in any way remarkable, and I don't mean to make anyone feel uncomfortable, then remark upon their name. That's a really interesting name, etc. So you repeat their name. In terms of facts, ask them nice open questions about themselves, for sure. I think in ink. So particularly in the old fashioned world of events, I will always have a notepad, a piece of paper, and I will scribble on it, because not to remember, but the writing helps me remember. So I think in ink, even in virtual events, and you've been thinking in ink probably, or on your keyboard. That's quite old fashioned, think in ink. So always think in ink, and always take the time, in the pink, Back to the Future, always take the time afterwards to be curious. I call it nosy, but curious about the people you've met. So yeah, I won't be hesitating to look up Ross Drakes after I've met him, because I found him so intriguing. So just try and hit that home run, particularly in your follow-ups, Ross. And this is the interesting thing. So the seed for the follow-up in the conversation. So this morning I've met with one of your colleagues, and it wasn't Peter, but I think it was Omar, and it'll come back to me in a second. And we talked about a very specific hotel near where I live, which is just fantastic hospitality. And I'm going to follow up with him in my mind, mentioning that hotel as well. So it just completes that home run of a link there, and that bonds you together, if that makes sense. Is that helpful?
That is very helpful. I mean, I like that idea of kind of connecting that loop and coming back, you know, almost revisiting that person so you don't forget them, and almost cementing them in your mind, I think is a very critical piece that I can potentially work on myself. I'm not sure if it's a question here, but Simone Musgrave would like to give Pink the musician a bottle of her delicious gin, Musgrave Pink. How would you advise Simone to go about tracking Pink down, who I'm sure gets battered on social media by millions of people who want all sorts of things from her?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, I mean, I ran a class for Cambridge University for 4 years, with a group called the Queen's Young Leaders, and their homework before flying to Cambridge was to write an audacious long shot. And some of them met Obama, some of them met Malala, several had met heads of state. But the secret they'd all used is just putting it out there, because we can talk about big data all day long, but the fact is, for big data to be helpful, it has to be codified in the first place. And the secret no one really tells you about connections is that most of the links to the people we want to meet haven't been codified. So actually, Simone is far more likely to hear from a friend in a group like this, oh, do you know what? My friend used to babysit her, or they actually grew up in the same neighborhood. So actually putting it out there really matters. The second thing, if you're serious, Simone, is, and I'm sure you are, is doing a little bit of network mapping about Pink herself. And I don't know enough to do that at the moment, but also what makes her up, whether that's her label, is it some of her passions, the charities she supports, some of her key collaborators. And having hosted the Staying Alive fundraiser for MTV for a couple of years, I noticed actually, if you wanted to get to a very well-known rock star, you might be better going in through their love of fine art rather than their love of rock and roll. So it's just doing a little bit of network mapping around that. The final one is so obvious, forgive me, but when we got some names like Stephen Fry and Sir Lenny Henry to join our Turn on the Subtitles campaign, we did it old-fashioned. We wrote a great note through their agent. We kept it brief, we kept it pithy, and of course they said, yeah, I'd love to hear a bit more. So if you're offering something wonderful, which you are, don't be afraid to go straight through their agent. They will get requests all the time, but frankly, if it's a nicely written gift from an entrepreneur, the chances are they might say yes.
Great, thank you. That's inspired me to get busy.
Yeah, I'm going to get Google as well. I'm going to look for angles for you.
Thank you.
I look forward to seeing the photo on social media of Pink clutching your bottle with a smile on her face.
It's going to happen. Watch
this. Does anyone else have any questions, or I'm going to steal the time because, you know, Ollie's one of those people who I will ask a million questions if nobody else does. So while people are furiously typing in the chat box, Ollie, you know, I suppose we live in this time where we're all digital and we all split. And there's Twitter and there's Facebook and there's, you know, all these different networks. Like, are you putting yourself on every network? Are you focusing specifically in one place? Like, which are the networks that are showing huge value for you? You know, Tinder, Grindr. I mean, I'm not sure where you're spending your time.
All of the above. It's good. It's nice to bump into you again, actually. For me with LinkedIn, I'm noticing value over time. For me, Twitter can be a little bit of a conveyor belt, here today, gone tomorrow. Twitter I use unashamedly to fire up my mind. I love tuning into what scientists or teachers or greengrocers are thinking about. So I will use it creatively. I'll also hack Twitter by using certain search phrases to lead me to content. So people will often use the phrase sheer genius or this is incredible to describe something. So I will search Twitter using that particular term, and it will ping my brain with content. I mean, so many of the things I've helped to start have come from reading news articles, right? So that's the one thing newspapers are full of is bad news. So that gets us thinking. To be honest, not so much Facebook and Instagram, except for my personal networks, but LinkedIn, absolutely. I'm quite careful about the direct messages I send, but I think we don't realize just how powerful LinkedIn's algorithm is in terms of its noticing what we like, what we share, what we comment on that draws that attention. So if you want to get closer to someone's radar, the center of their radar, taking a more active interest, you know, if you're at an event, and especially a virtual event, the single biggest way to raise your profile, not with this speaker, but with your other guests, is by asking a question like Simone has just done for Musgrave Pink. A friend of mine chaired the Big Issue, the homelessness charity in the UK. His strategy for events before lockdown was to ask the most outrageous question he could before the first coffee break, because at the break, he'd have a queue of people who wanted to argue with him or pat him on the back. Okay. Another friend of mine who runs Baloo Water used to carry a yellow notebook everywhere she went because she knew it would act as a magnetic talking point, whichever room she went into. So think about how you're raising your profile across these. And by the way, it's not about you. It's not about sharing what you're doing. It's daring to point the spotlight at someone else doing something cool and interesting. So if you want to rocket charge your Twitter following and your LinkedIn followers, just spend your time saying, look over here, look at what these organizations are doing. It's awesome. From time to time, maybe chuck in something about yourself.
That's amazing. So Andrew asks, how much time a day do you dedicate to networking?
Yeah, so I don't think of it like that. I tend to have most luck, as I say, with my long shots, particularly if they're really quite whimsical and it would be good to cross paths late at night. But I don't proactively set aside 20 minutes. What I've tried to do is just build in those habits. So I might, and I have many large blank pieces of paper, pads of paper, where I will map out a bit of my network, because for me, names lead on to other names. So just by mentioning Julia, I think of Tom, I think of another Tom, I think of Millie. You know, I start to map out names, and all of a sudden I've got a little plan of who I want to get back in touch with. But then crucially, Ross, particularly on that sharing of articles, you know, I've got the latest copy of The Economist behind me. When I read that later today, I'm not going to go sending every article I read to somebody, but I predict that 2 or 3 pieces in that I might share with 1 or 2 other people. So I think it's a whole act of cultivation, because where you're trying to get to in this is that you can pick up the phone to someone in your network and they'll be pleased to hear you, pleased to hear from you. They will want to help you, and they're not going, Ross Drakes, now he arrives 3 years after I've heard from him. You know, actually, you want that light way to keep in touch all the way along. So those 2-minute habits will transform your network much more than 20 minutes a day.
I like that. And I suppose it leads really easily into Rich's question is, how should you reconnect with someone that asked for your details, took them, never contacted, but is famous, so you can't reach out? And then he says it's a very specific use case.
So just read me the question again.
How do you reconnect with someone that asked for your details, took those details, and then never contacted you, but that person's famous, so you can't really reach out to them?
Well, I'm guessing that they met in person.
Yeah, so I think Rich met Mariah Carey, and he was like, "Hello, Mariah. I've always respected your work." And she was like, "Okay, this is awkward. Give me your card, please." And he gave her his card, and then she never got in touch.
Yeah, well, I think, Rich, I would say, when a hero comes along with the strength to carry on, you just cast your fears aside, really. I'm sure a lot of people on the call are going to agree with this. But what you would look at him treading up and down, I mean, he is multitasking. So what I would say, if you have shared the same physical space, I don't mean that as a euphemism. If you've been in the same location, even the same virtual event, you have to backdate it to that, because that will override so many of the things that will put someone off, because then you can go from this random to go, no, we met in Cannes, remember, at the music festival, and we had that really powerful conversation. So I would always try and anchor it back to that conversation, because I think that will really cut through more than anything. Here we go, Rich.
Ollie, thanks, man. I've got I guess a follow-up to this. So he was very like, oh, dude, we've got to do work together. This was incredible. Please take my card. And I made the stupid mistake of not saying, yeah, thanks, cool, give me yours as well. Or no, sorry, he said, please give me your card. And I was too embarrassed to ask for his number, which is stupid, because if somebody asks you for your number, you absolutely can ask it back. Should I wait until I have a very good reason to want to engage, or should I try re-engage when there's no good reason, just for the purpose of re-engaging, so that there is rapport rather than reaching out when something matters?
I mean, very, very personal, but my instinct is re-engage before you have something, and don't be afraid to dial up the compliments, noticing what they're currently up to, and just making that point that it would be great to keep in touch. Yeah, I think if you can sow that seed, you won't regret sowing that seed, and far better that than just, and by the way, don't forget to put in the fact that their stock has risen, but so has yours. You continue to do amazing things. So you can sow that in lightly, not to make it a competition, but just to say, hey, you might remember we met in Oxford, and I really enjoyed that conversation by the canal. And I can see you've done, and don't name check the most famous thing they've done. So, I saw you were in Kenya recently, and with that show you've just recorded, or so go more specific and recent in the update, and say, anyway, this is just a note to say it would be great to keep in touch, and I really hope we'll cross paths again. I think that is a good investment, Rich.
Thanks, Ollie. I appreciate that.
So I think, Ollie, we've got time for one last question. Well, we actually don't really, but I like the question and I'm in charge, so I get to ask it anyway. This is from Omar. It says, can you tell us a bit more about how to overcome the fear or anxiety that many feel when reaching out to someone or meeting someone who might be a celebrity or someone who's extremely accomplished? Like, do you have any experience shares on how to overcome that anxiety and I think just get to the thing of reaching out?
Yeah, so I would go back to those principles of brevity, of positivity, of warmth. And if you embed those in your note, there's no way that anyone is ever going to come back and tell, in 20 years, no one's ever told me off for sending them an email. They might have, eventually got annoyed at my persistence, right? But not in the first instance. So a lot of that fear is just what you've suggested. It's an anxiety in the mind of the person about to send the email. So I would go back to, what's the worst that can happen? Because if it's that long shot email, the worst they can do is probably go, this is outrageous, your chairman or something. But ask yourself, is this really the sort of email that would merit that sort of response? So don't be afraid just to go for it. But I would also say that in physical environments, in virtual events as well, just say, do you mind if I introduce do you mind if I introduce myself? Keep it brief, keep it positive, keep it complimentary about their work. And don't forget that if you're in an environment like that, most people the most successful people in the world don't shut down all their routes to connecting with the outside world. They still are open to new ideas and new opportunities. So I'd just say go for it.
That's super helpful. Thank you, Ollie. We're gonna jump into the next portion of the event, but Ollie, thank you so much. That was a very information dense 50 minutes. And as a last thing, just to everyone, we will send this out as an email, but Ollie has created an amazing course on buildabetternetwork.com, and he's generously offered everyone a discount on that course. So we'll share the link to the course and the voucher. So thank you very much for your time, Ollie. We really
You're
appreciate
welcome,
it.
Ross, and it's so good to see everybody. And just to say, it's actually buildabetter.network. But we'll send you the code to that. But I've got all sorts of people to contribute. But it's so great to reconnect with you, and good luck in this next session. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Ollie. We really appreciate it. So Peter, now over to you to tee up the next session.
Thanks so much, Ross. And thank you, Ollie. That was amazing.